One. Hello, and welcome to episode number 8 of the Tweedle Eat, Tweedle Run podcast, where Steph and I document our Run Disney adventures at both Disney World and Disneyland parks. I'm Court, and this is Steph.
Hello, and as always, you can interact with us on Instagram at TweedleEatTweedleRun or reach out to us by email at tweedleeattweedlerun@gmail.com. We're also on YouTube and Spotify and Amazon Music. And if you like what you see in here, don't forget to like and subscribe. On today's episode, we're going to be talking a little bit about the origin story that is this dynamic duel of Court and Steph. So, uh, Court, where do you want to start? From the very, very, very beginning?
From the very, very, very beginning. Now, unlike typical Disney stories, it did not involve our parents dying in
Well,
the start. Parents died in the between, but not at the start. It wasn't the
yeah,
original origin story like every Disney movie seems to be. But
that is true.
so we've talked about playing ultimate frisbee, and this was actually how we got to know each other. We met, I think the first time we played together was in 2016. Is that right? No, 20.
What would have been? No, it was before
No, it was
that.
wait. Oh, sorry. 20,
Way before that.
2000 and 2010, 2010,
I
2010.
would say 2010 Sherbrooke.
Yeah,
Was 2010
2010.
Sherbrooke?
You know, was it?
I think it was.
Broken
That was because that was the year
hand.
before I got married. When did you break your hand? Was that
Which one?
2010?
I broke both of
When you
them.
broke your hand just before nationals, that was just before Sherbrooke.
I feel like that was 2010. I only played, so Steph and I, so we first started playing on a team together. It was a women's competitive touring team based out of Kitchener-Waterloo. And I had played only 1 year of touring the year before with a competitive team, a mixed team. And a mutual friend of ours, Nina, was trying to convince me to play women's, and I was not sure. I thought, no, I like playing mixed. I don't think I want to play on this women's team. And then I played women's, and it was all the things they said it was going to be. It was so good. But
It's
yeah, I think
a
it was
it's a
2010.
2010. Yeah, 2010 would make sense. Like, because I'm pretty sure that was the year before I got married. And we went to Sherbrooke, and that was the year that you went parading down the sideline with your broken hand because you broke your hand just before, like the week before nationals. And it
Yeah.
was the year that the boys all did Mohawks for Maverick, I believe.
Yes. So we played on a women's team called PPF, and we cannot tell you what it means because you only get to know if you play on the team. And
We are
even our
sworn to
husbands,
secrecy.
our husbands don't know, despite the number of times that they feel like we should have told them by now. And our husbands played on a men's, which they call open in Ultimate Frisbee, on a men's team that same year. And both of our teams qualified and went to Canadian Nationals, which, as Steph said, were in Sherbrooke. And so we childlessly, because neither of us had kids at that point yet, went and partied and hung out and had great times. As Steph said, I had broken my hand like the week before, so I was there really just to hang out and party because I couldn't even play.
No, and she was a very good loud sideline. There was a lot of good cheering by Court on the sideline.
I was good. Yeah, I was a good team member. But yeah, so we played that year, and then yeah, 2011 you got married. Well, actually, sorry,
Yep.
for earlier in 2011, our friends Nat and Andy got married, and they had a
Yes.
destination wedding that we all went to. And so we hung out there, and we did travel together for some of the tournaments that first year of PPF. I think we even stayed together a few times. I think we were roommates for a few of
We
the
did, because
in a
that
few of
was
the
when I
hotels.
discovered that Dan slept like a vampire.
Hmm.
So the first time was in the
Yeah.
Sherbrooke hotels. Dan.
Yeah, yeah. My husband doesn't move when he sleeps, and he sleeps with his hands like tucked
On it,
on
like
on
tucked
his
like this.
chest. So
And then he
people
would
say he
even wear
sleeps
like
like a vampire.
well, and he'd wear like a hat to cover his face. So he'd be
Yeah,
like sleeping in bed like this with a hat over his face. So yeah,
yeah.
that's where I learned that Dan slept like a vampire for the first time.
Yes. And yeah, so we got to know each other, our husbands got to know each other, and then we went on to this destination wedding with friends of ours. And then in 2011, Steph got married, and I was pregnant with Cooper at your wedding.
Yeah.
And then I didn't play in 2011, but then in 2012 I played again for PPF, and we played that season together. And I think we played one more season together. I think we played 2014 together.
Well, 2014 was the year that we won. So yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that was the year that our team PPF won nationals, which was super
Yeah.
exciting. And we were
That
definitely
was
on that
the
team together.
and that was the year of my official retirement, which I've crawled out of a few times now.
Yes. Yeah, I played a few more years after that, but yeah, and that was the year I had Deacon. Was in 2014. So it was a big year. Had a baby in January and won nationals in August.
Yeah.
The start of doing ridiculous things to my body.
Yeah, basically. But
But so
yeah,
then,
that I
yeah,
guess.
and then we just sort of stayed friends, throughout. Like our husbands kept playing Ultimate together. Like Steph said, she kind of retired, but then we'd pick up and play in just like fun tournaments. Like we'd play in this tournament in Peterborough where, you go and you camp, and it's like you play Ultimate and you go camping and
And you try to put
hang out
together
and
like if it's
party.
a team of friends and that sort of stuff. And like our husbands played together for a long while afterwards, just on various men's teams.
And then we all went to Worlds that was in Winnipeg that one year. I think that was 2018, was it Worlds?
That was 2018, yeah, because we
Yeah,
brought Elliot with us.
right. And so Steph and I didn't play on the same team that year, but our husbands did play on the same
Yeah,
team. They played on the same Masters team. So again, like, kind of traveling together, hanging out together. So there was a lot of that. And then I think what really started or I don't know, kicked it off into full gear was in 2018. Oh, and then Dan, our husbands also play hockey together. So then every
yes.
week they would play hockey, and then Dan would go back to your place afterwards and hang out and chat and whatever. And so one of the times that he was over at your house, he mentioned that we were planning a trip to Hawaii in 2018. And I guess, Higgy was like, hey, we'd go with you if you
Yeah,
want. And I was like, are they serious? Do they really want to come? You were both like, yeah, we'll go. And Dan and I are like Uber planners, and Steph and Higgy are like, go with the flow and happy to do whatever. So it worked so well.
I did. And like Hawaii is our one of our most favorite places to go. So it worked out really well in that it was like, okay, yeah, we'll go and do Hawaii again. And we did part of what we had done when Higgy and I went on our honeymoon. And so that was good. And then we did a whole different part of Hawaii, and we all had a really good time. It helped that like before Higgy and I had kids, we really admired a lot of aspects of Dan and Court's parenting skills. So to travel with them on a trip and have see how they parented their boys, and we had our son, it was like, yeah, like this kind of all goes and it worked really well. And it made for very easy travel and very fun travel because we could still do stuff as a family, we could do stuff as friends. We did trade-offs so that there was stuff that we really wanted to do as a couple and stuff that they really wanted to do as a couple that we had done before. So when they went and did their thing, we took the boys, and then when we did our thing, they took the boys, and it was good and easy and a lot of fun. Kind of set us on a path that like this is something we want to keep doing
Yeah,
for
well,
sure.
and despite the age gap between our kids, like they definitely get along really well. They refer to each other as like their brothers. And I still remember there was one time, this was a few years later, we were playing in a fun tournament again together just in town. And my two boys were walking with Elliot, Steph's oldest, and walked over, and some players kind of knew who my boys were just from seeing them at tournaments, and they were chatting with them. So these are, like adults. And they're like, "Oh, who's this?" And Cooper's like, "Oh, this is my brother, Elliot." And they're looking at him because clearly he's Asian
Yeah.
and Cooper is not Asian. They're like, "This is your brother?"
Well,
And
and
Cooper's just
Elliot
like,
later,
"Yep."
yep, yep. And Elliot later goes to me like, Mom, Cooper was calling me his brother. I'm like, that's because you are. And he's like, oh. okay,
Oh,
and just kind
okay.
of like went along with it. And ever since then, he always refers to Deacon and Cooper as his big brothers.
Yeah,
So
so they always got along, and it was actually nice because my boys enjoy bickering and driving me insane, but they always do better when there's a buffer. And I found even just Elliot, like he was just a good buffer sort of between them, that it was somebody else to interact with. And so anyway, so yeah, so it was a great trip. We all decided, yep, we meshed well in our traveling styles. None of us annoyed the other ones too
yeah,
much to not want to do it again. And so that's really where it started. And then we kept kind of trying to find trips that we could do together. We did a trip up to Tobamori, which is kind of like cottage country. We rented a cottage and did sort of a road trip, cottaging trip together. And we've had your family up at just our family cottage most years. And
yeah,
yeah, the kids seem to all enjoy getting together, and then
yeah,
the adults enjoy each other's company. And I think it's not as common that you would find where, sometimes the wives are friends, the husbands are friends. I feel like for our relationship, it's that we all sort of met each other at the same time. And
yeah,
it's like we each get along with each other's spouses, but then we all get along. Like
totally.
it's, yeah, it
There are definitely
works.
situations where like exactly that. Sometimes like the wives are comfortable together, the husbands are comfortable together, but I think like you'd be perfectly fine with Higgy in a room and I'd be perfectly fine with Dan in a room and it's not weird. So I
Yeah,
think
no,
that's what
exactly. It
makes it
wouldn't
all
be
work.
like, oh God, when is Steph
What
coming
am I
back
gonna
in the room?
do?
Cool. What am I going to talk to Higgy about? Right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we mesh really well together. So now fast forward. So then the pandemic hit, and I had a trip planned in 2020 with some girlfriends that got canceled because of the pandemic. And so Dan and I had taken our kids to Disney for the first time in 2019. And I just sort of like fell in love with the planning of it. And there was so much to do. And I was so excited to try it all. And I sort of said to my husband, I said, hey, like, I don't want to overload our trip. I want to have a good trip, but like, I might do another trip, like with some girlfriends to do some of the other stuff that doesn't make sense to do with our young kids. And he's like, yeah, totally makes sense, whatever. So that trip got canceled. So I had this like itch of like, I really, really want to go. So, I messaged the group that Steph and I have with some of our friends is like, hey, is there any chance anyone would want to go to Disney? And Steph was like, I'll go. Sure. It sounds like fun. We had another friend who was kind of maybe going to come, but she's a teacher and we were going to sort of go in September. And she just like, I don't think the dates will really work. And we're like, totally makes sense. So September 2021, I talked Steph into going. Steph is 7 months pregnant with your
Yeah,
youngest?
almost that. I
Six?
was like
Six?
27 weeks pregnant, like just before my 28 week, like just before third trimester, basically.
Yeah,
So
so she's like, "Yeah, sure, I'll go," so excited. And then I think it was about 3 days before we were supposed to go. There's all these reports of this huge COVID outbreak in Florida. I had not had COVID yet at this point. I don't think you had COVID
no,
yet at this point. It was still kind of in that world of like we were, I was still staying home all the time. The kids were sort of back in school, but not fully back in everything. And everyone was still wearing masks everywhere. And so it still felt, I don't know, a little bit scary. And so I'm like freaking out. I'm like, is this so stupid? Should we be doing this and taking this big risk? And anyways, and like Steph, on the other hand, was working as a physio the whole time. So she's always out of the house and always kind of potentially exposed. And I think you had just a very different
yeah.
mindset and feeling to it. Whereas I was like sequestered in my house for a year and
I
nine
was
months at this point.
Well, 'cause for all of the pandemic, most of the major part of the pandemic, I was on mat leave. So I was the one that was sent out of the house to retrieve all the things. And then when I went back to work, I worked with the public. I just was masked and practiced all like the hand washing protocols and distancing protocols. So I was very comfortable being out in public. So when Court all of a sudden decided to like turtle and be like, "No, I don't think we should go," I'm like, "No, no, no. We've done all this planning. We need to go. We need to do this. We need to go. We're not canceling now." So that was how it
And
started.
And really, actually, Dan was also the other one who was like, "Look, are you really gonna disappoint Steph and like not go?" And you're just so. Anyways, people talked sense into me. I was like, "Okay, we'll be okay. We'll be very careful." And so we went. We stayed at Pop Century, which was delightful, and loved the Skyliner. And we wore our masks and we hand sanitized. We had a little ritual after every ride. They had
Yeah.
hand sanitizer at the end of the ride, but when you squirted it, you got like a handful of hand sanitizer. It was so much,
So much.
like way more
Like,
than one person needs. So we would one of us would get it and we
or
would smack our hands together and then we would do like a high five. Can we, yeah, high five, whatever.
high
We'd kind
five,
of do like
whatever.
a sliding high five together. So then we'd each get it on our hands.
And it
Every
was
ride.
still like so much for even like two people to like
We did
smear it
it.
all
Yeah.
that way. It
We
was a
did it
lot of
every
hand
ride.
sanitizer.
Yeah, and you know what? Neither of us got COVID. We did stay in the Disney bubble. It was funny. We were talking to people, and they're like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you're going to Florida." We're like, "No, no, no. We're going to Disney. I'm not going to the rest of
Very
Florida.
different.
I
Very
plan to
different.
stay in the Disney bubble. I'm going from the airport to the Disney bubble, from the Disney bubble to the airport."
Well, except for when we ventured out on our adventure because we had to get COVID tests to go
Oh,
home.
that
So
was
that
an
was like a
adventure.
whole adventure in itself because we had to like make appointments at Walgreens and we ended up making an appointment at two different Walgreens at opposite ends of
I
like
know.
Kissimmee and we're just like,
Well, no,
what is
first
happening?
I made an appointment. I thought I was making them at the same Walgreens, and I booked the appointment specifically because I was like, "Well, this way I'll make sure I make them at the same one." But
Yeah.
I I don't I can only assume that when I went to make the next one, it just reset and somehow just reset to a different location. But we went to one location and found out it was the wrong location. It was the one that was on the same street, but like 3 miles further down. Go to
Yeah.
that one, get my test, and then they don't have Steph's test. And I'm like, but I booked two. And they said, well, where did you book it? Oh, no, no, at a third Walgreens location. So we just drove around in an Uber all over Florida, going to different Walgreens. I mean, it was just through the drive-through, so we never actually left the Uber during our
Yeah.
adventure.
But it was more that our Uber driver is like, these girls are crazy. What is happening?
Being like, we are so sorry, but we're gonna need to go to another Walgreens. He's like,
Yeah.
it's cool.
So we
But
tipped
so
him
we,
well.
I
It was all
know.
good.
We
We
had
were
great
allowed to go
adventures.
home. We had negative tests, which was good because that was also
The
our fear was that we were going to test
yeah.
positive and not know and not be able to go home.
The funny thing was is that the timing of it, because you had to get your test, you could get your test because we were only there for a long weekend. So we basically flew to Florida and landed and like within whatever being there for 6 hours or whatever it was, had to go and get our tests so that
Yeah.
they'd be ready because it took whatever it was. I think it was like 48 hours to get your
Two or
results,
yeah,
something like
they,
that.
they said to give yourself 48 hours to do it.
Yeah, and so we
So
like had to wait. So it was like I'm like, it's kind of pointless. Like I just got this like because we had to get a test to fly down there, and then we had to get a test to fly home, but we basically got it as soon as we landed. So, anyways, but that's what they required. So we did it. We got to go to Disney, and then so I've talked Steph into this one. We had a great time.
Yep.
Steph sweat like
Immensely.
so much
Like
sweat.
this is the second week in September and
It
I'm
was hot.
not very pregnant, but pregnant enough. Plus I run hot generally. Like even
Yeah,
when I'm not pregnant, I'm a very sweaty person and then you throw in a very warm baby and all of a sudden I'm that much warmer.
and
Um, I
it's
just remember
Florida
like
heat, so it's like
yeah,
humid, so humid.
I just remember every time we'd walk by someplace in Epcot and there'd be a door open, it'd be like, oh my God, this is the best feeling ever.
Because the
Just like the
whoosh of
breeze coming through.
air
Like
conditioning
that
coming out.
that was good. And I distinctly remember when we finally went swimming at like 10 o'clock at Pop that one night and just like dying in the water, being like, this is lovely. Just finally feeling cool.
Yes, we started our Disney adventures by going open to close, and most of the closes were after the pool would close. So by the time we get
Yes.
back to Pop Century, the pool would already be closed, and Steph would be like, "Someday pool, I'm gonna get in." And so the last
I'm gonna
night, I
get in you
think
and it's gonna be glorious.
we actually
Good.
made it back.
Otherwise, I would just have a shower because otherwise it was just disgusting. Giant sweat ball.
Yeah.
So yes.
So it was type 1 and type 2 fun for those who listened to our last episode.
Yes.
But so much fun that then because at this point now, Steph is pretty big into running, retired from Ultimate, but got really into running. And so I said, Steph, there's these Run Disney events that I've always sort of wanted to try, but I'm not sure if it's my thing. And, would you want to do it? And so it was August 2022. So we had gone like the year before. And I'm like, it's not until April 2023, right? So it was sort of like we didn't go every year. It was like, oh, it's
No.
kind of like 2 years apart. And she's like, okay, maybe I can sell this to the hubby that, it's not
This is
like,
what we're gonna do. Well,
yeah, it's
and
just going
I
to be
was
a long weekend.
and I was well aware of the races. Like I've had numerous clients who have ran the races, so I knew about them and I knew what they were. So like when I learned about what the dopey was, I was like, well, this is a ludicrous idea. Who would ever want to do that? Fast
Yeah.
forward
Yeah. 2 years.
6 years
6
from when I
Yeah.
had that conversation with the client about that.
The
But
so yeah, so I said, do you want to do this? And as Steph talked about in one of our previous episodes of getting race bibs, we sort of debated it for a while. Do we do the 10K? Do we 10 miler? And it's we kind of thought, well, the 10K doesn't seem like it would be like a huge challenge because like I
no,
said, Steph was already running a lot. I ran, often enough. We would sometimes like at the cottage, we would run together sort of thing. And so we decided, well, maybe, but then, well, if we want to walk through the parks, maybe 10K is better because then we won't be so tired. Anyways, by the time the debating ended and everyone was convinced to go, the only thing we could do was the 10 miler. And then, so yeah, so then that was the second trip that we did. And I should say, I will back up a little bit. When we played PPF, and this is what also I think put us in the right. We were destined to enjoy the Run Disney events because PPF had a big tradition of pageantry. So every year at the Canadian Nationals when PPF would attend. So the way that nationals are set up is that you play, there's 4 days of playing. The first 3 days are sort of the regular pool games, and then the third day is sort of the quarters and semifinals, and the fourth day is just for the finals. And so there's always a party on the Saturday night. The after the third day, there's always a party, and then everyone kind of just you know rolls out of bed to go watch the final or whatever. And so PPF had a tradition that they would get dressed up and there was always a theme. And so you got dressed up in this theme and you would go to the party and win the party. And so,
it was
you
always
know,
one of the goals.
even the year that we won nationals, the goal was to win all of our games day one, all of our games day two, all of our games day three, win the party, and then win finals, right? So, and that was like part of the goals of the team. So it's like this whole mentality of like, yes, we're working hard and, we're, being competitive and athletic and all this, but hey, we are having a good time and we're going to dress up and be silly. And yeah, that's what we're all about. So, then you look at these Disney races where it's like, okay, you're going to go destroy your body and do races every single day, Steph, but you get to dress up.
Then you get to do the perks in between, and then you get to repeat it all over the next
Yeah.
day. This
And
is like
drinking is
and drink.
encouraged.
Drinking is encouraged, which is also part of the PPF MO is drinking is encouraged while you are able to play at the same time. Not for
Yeah.
like some serious tournaments, but for definitely all the very fun ones, drinking is heavily encouraged.
Yeah. So, it's so then you take that as sort of the base of like where we met and what we were sort of used to. And it really just makes sense that we would just
It
fall
all
into
does. This
the
is the
Run Disney
epiphany moment
events.
that we're like, well, this was all just meant to be.
Was that we were just that was the early training for the
Yeah,
Run
I
Disney
guess
we're
so.
doing now. So yeah, and then we signed up for the springtime surprise in 2023. And as we've mentioned before, so during that trip is when on I think it was the last day we went to the castle, right? So it was
It was
after
yeah,
we did our 10 miler, right?
yeah, it was the day, it was the Monday, it was Metal Monday when after the weekend of races, those people who are foolish enough to run everything, especially after the springtime surprise, if they've done a perfect season or run multiple races in a season, they show up at Magic Kingdom or wherever really. Like it could be they'll take pictures anywhere, but it always seems to be like at Magic Kingdom is where they show up with all the medals on display and take
All the
like
medals.
all the medals, like pictures in front of the castles with like arms spread out, covered in medals, or like they sit in the middle and they have medals all around them, and there's just a whole pageantry. Pageantry is the way to
Pageantry.
describe the way it all looked. And me being historically a collector of many things and wanting to get all the magical points in the world that mean nothing to anyone but something to me,
Mhm.
was like, yes, this I'd like to do at some point in time. And because my 40th birthday is coming up, yes, this is what we will do for my 40th birthday.
It just kind of fell into place, and it's so funny looking back because it's like that fateful, just that message in a group chat being like, "Would anyone be crazy enough to do this with me?" And Steph is like, "It turns out I am crazy enough to do this with you." And then, "Would anyone
Even
want to do
more
this Red
so
Disney event?" Turns out Steph's like, "Yeah, I'll do that one. We'll do it one time. One time."
one time. I'll do it one time only and then we'll see what happens. Here we are many times later when I tell all the people all the times we're going to Disney and how many times we're going to Disney within the next 6 months. They're like, but why? When you live all the way in Canada, but
I know,
why?
I know, but we are collecting our Aeroplan points so that we can
We are
try and fly as much as we can for free or close to free. Our flights that we booked for California, we booked mostly on points.
in
So,
points.
it's
Yeah.
we're doing what we can to save up
Yeah.
for it, but we got the annual pass for Disney World so that, we know
With
we're
a
gonna
discount on it because of the time that we purchased it. So, we saved a few $100 there too.
we did, yeah. So then that's Disney math right there. So we're
Yeah. That
saving
is
money.
totally Disney math.
And yeah, that's sort of that's the origin story of how this whole crazy adventure kind of got kicked off, and Steph and I traveling together. And I mean, we still travel with the families. So,
We do.
it's funny, my family and I went to Japan last year, and I think we were like very close to
But you guys,
your family joining us. And it
yeah,
was so silly because I think it came down to like a matter of like 2 weeks here or there. Like
totally.
you and Higgy were on like
Mat leave,
maternity,
pat leave.
pat
Yeah.
leave, whatever. But then we were trying to schedule it between school and all of our kids' sports. And so we're
Yeah.
like, well, we have to go at this point because that's the only kind of break they have. And anyway, so it kind of didn't line up. I think Steph is still maybe a little bit annoyed that you
I
didn't end up
I
coming
may
with
not
us,
be
but
as annoyed as some people were, but I was annoyed enough because I really wanted to go to Japan and I get it too. Like our kids are on that age where like they're on the cusp of being like not quite old enough. Like I almost want to say this year would even be a better year with them because now they're like slightly easier to deal with, although there are moments
they still
as I
have
listen to.
I mean, I still have moments with my
I
children
know.
where I'm like, oh my goodness, like even on that Japan trip, there, I actually was like, oh, I kind of wish your kids were here because my kids were just like sick of each other by, the second day
Yeah.
and
And
bickering.
versus if you had thrown my kids into the mix, it would have been like a way to mellow them out. Because somehow the five of them work very well together. Like when we go to the
Yeah.
cottage with you guys, there's very little bickering amongst all the children, a little bit in between siblings, but then usually when the other like family steps in, it kind of all works out.
I know
So
it's enough to sort of just, yeah, keeps them all even keel. Yeah. So we'll do cottage this year. And then we have talked a little bit about maybe trying to do a bigger trip next year. I know I sort of
yeah,
threw out New Zealand out there as maybe
New
one that
Zealand's
we
been
might
thrown
try.
out.
Yeah.
We've also talked about doing like Copenhagen. That's been in discussion before.
Yeah, I know.
If
I've been looking at maybe trying to do something over the Christmas break. So we may have to chat, Steph, about
chat and
what
plan.
what might
Well,
be
and maybe if
doable.
our children are lucky enough, we'll actually bring them on the princess race if we get into that princess race week.
Yeah, that's kind of the goal. So we're gonna do the Disneyland Halloween half didn't really make sense given it's sort of the first week of school. So we'll be home for the first day of school, I
Like
guess now, since they don't go
the
until the
first day of
Wednesday, and
school, because
yeah, we fly out
we
the
fly out the
Thursday.
Thursday. Yeah.
So we'd be like, picture first day of school. Okay, bye.
Bye.
We're leaving. And so we were like, well, we don't really want to bring them. That first week is just like getting to know people, like your new teachers in class and everything. And
Plus, it's my
so
birthday.
plus it's your birthday, and
I
Steph's like,
mean,
I don't
okay,
want
fine.
to.
It would be nice to spend, I guess, some time with my family on my birthday, but I also
It might
don't
be
feel I
also more
have to.
fun to try all the espresso martinis and ride all the Disneyland rides and run a
Yeah,
10K with your Disney bestie over here.
that's right. Run the 5K on my actual birthday all solo because I have yet to have one come up again.
It could happen,
Telegram.
Steph. It
It
could.
could.
We're fingers crossed that that might
Fingers
happen,
crossed.
and then yeah, the February one kind of seemed to make sense as, hey, maybe this would work out. We've talked about Steph's brother, Uncle Justin, coming to help wrangle the kids because at least one of the days both of us will be running. So my kids are old enough that I can leave them, in the hotel room on their own. I mean, Cooper will be 13 at that point, assuming that he comes, but. We were like, well, maybe it'd be helpful just to have like one more adult to come. And Justin sounded more than happy to come with us. So
Well, and he's never been to Disney World. He's been to Disneyland a couple of times, so going to Disney World, I think, is a pretty exciting adventure for him. Plus, everyone seems to love Uncle Justin,
oh,
including
who
your
doesn't
kids.
love? I know my kids call him Uncle Justin.
Yeah, so it'll be fine. And
Yeah.
I
So those.
think actually, like once we get into motion, my brother would actually probably look a lot forward to it. He's
Yeah.
the person that whenever we go to Disney, I always have to bring something back for him.
That's true. You are always getting him some kind of souvenir. And even to the point where now I'm like, hey, do you think Justin would like this? What about this thing? Steph, look what I found for Justin. It's like you've
Exactly.
trained me to look for stuff for Justin too now. So yeah, so our families just sort of now are melting together, and the trips won't end even if at some point this Run Disney adventure ends. But it's been a ride so far, and I'm looking forward to the next 30, 40 years of travel. At some point, these kids will
Woo!
be grown up, and just the four of us can travel, which is just going to be so much fun.
I mean, we did have that exciting adventure last summer to the dump, the four of us, when we left all the children with Cooper.
That's true. We did leave. We left Cooper in charge of all the kids because I think, I think just Dan, Higgy, and I were gonna go or something. And Steph's like, "Whoa, I have to stay here with all the children," and we're like, "Well, I mean, I guess Cooper's like 12. We could probably
Yeah.
leave the kids. We're only like." I mean, it's what, 4 kilometers down the road, and we were going to be there for all of 10 minutes. So I'm like, well, I don't think anything's gonna happen. And I think
No.
we
And
even put like the TV on for them or something. Like we're like
well,
basically just don't let Sawyer swallow anything. That's the probably the biggest risk.
I think actually Sawyer was probably even sleeping at that point because we
Yeah.
like went in the afternoon. So Sawyer was sleeping. So Cooper really only had to manage his brother, Elliot, and Sloane.
Well, and
So
and Elliot and Deacon, I'm pretty sure were just like playing Legos, or they were like perfectly content and happy, or playing some card game or
yeah,
whatever. And because I find Elliot and Deacon are actually pretty alike in terms of like what they like. They're
yeah.
really into the same sort of games, and so they get along really well. And so yeah, it was like basically just like keep Sloan happy and entertained, and they all survived, and everyone was
They did.
fine.
They all survived. I do remember the most exciting point of going to the dump was we got into the car and we're like, do we really want to just go to the dump?
We're free. We're free. Run.
We're free. Run, let's go.
Yes, well, and just as the kids get older, that's going to be much easier to have that
Yeah,
freedom. So, I mean, I look at it as like I have 5 more years before Cooper's off to university, which is kind of crazy. I
which
know.
is wild.
Where has the time gone, Steph?
I know.
It's crazy. And yet I am still like 27 years old. I don't know how that happened,
Oh,
that I didn't age and he did. So,
now is that even fair to say? Because did I know you when you were 27 years old? I guess I would have just known you at that point.
well, yeah, we play. What year did we decide? 2010. I was
2010.
28. I was
Yeah, so
28.
there you
But
go.
but we might have, in theory, we might have met the year before
Yeah.
because there we didn't play on the same team, but we were kind of
No.
getting to know some of the same people. So
But I knew who
maybe,
you were at that point. Like when you were playing co-ed, I knew who you were.
yeah, because there was like
So
some people that played on my co-ed team, but their, partners were on another team. And so,
Yeah,
you kind of got to know each other. And Ultimate Frisbee is very much a high school community, let's be honest, because it's not that big. And
true.
so it's kind of like everyone sort of knows of everyone. And now that we've been out of it for a number of years, I think it's obviously less so. But even at that, I can still recognize names of people on different teams.
And there are still people who come up to me and have at least heard of Higgy and I, and we haven't played for a long time at this point.
Yes, well, Higgy did make a name for himself.
I guess so.
He is the life of the party staff. He doesn't fall asleep on couches.
Hey, man, I don't do that as often anymore in party situations.
It's been known to happen.
It has been known to happen. To be fair,
When you only get 4 hours of sleep a night, you gotta get some shut eye here
you
and
got to
there
take
where
it when
you
you
get.
can.
Yeah.
And for a good chunk of my competitive career, I was in school. So there was like a lot of back and forth and studying and a lot, a lot, a
Sure.
lot.
Yeah, no. So occasional cat nap required on a couch at a party, totally acceptable.
Completely acceptable.
I'm
Under a
impressed that
table, I've definitely slept under a table.
I'm impressed you've never gotten like things drawn on you when you fall asleep at these
Oh no,
parties.
because they knew I would get them back. That's what it came down to. Because I definitely drew many penises on people's faces at other points. In fact, I think actually Higgy has had a penis drawn on his face.
I could
This
see
is
that.
like, yeah, like this is pre when I was playing co-ed days. So yeah,
University days?
little bit of university days, little bit of like gender blender era, early times, the early times,
Mm-hmm. Oh,
like
gender blender.
2007,
That's
2008
a
times.
whole nother level of pageantry of an ultimate tournament. So that was just another thing that trained us for these Run Disney events of just elaborate
Rid
dressing up and
Ridiculousness.
games and yeah,
Yeah,
good times. This is fun going down memory lane stuff.
I know. Good origin episode.
Yeah, I think so. Well, you know what, Steph? I think that'll about wrap it up for us. So I think we're about done here. What do you think?
Sounds good.
All right,
Tweedle
well,
out.
tweedle out.